Nigeria's power sector, no doubt, has been plagued with structural issues in all key areas such as generation, gas supply, transmission, and distribution. In a bid to address these challenges associated with electricity supply in the country, the federal government in 2013 privatized the power sector with the goal of improving power supply to the masses. Many years later, the fundamental changes still exist, making electricity supply remain largely inadequate. Although the country has an installed capacity of 12,522 megawatts, it is only able to generate around 4,000 megawatts, which is insufficient for the population of more than 200 million people. In recent weeks, Nigerians have suffered an extensive power outage as 18 plants accounting for most of the electricity the country generates had faced operational problems due to gas constraints and poor maintenance. Despite the introduction of a service-based tariff, which has increased electricity bills by over 100%, the service-based tariff, which was pegged on the premise of improved electricity supply, particularly in terms of increase or sustained hours of electricity supply, Nigerians are yet to reap the full benefits of these developments amid privatization of the sector. Well, I introduced him earlier. He's joining me via Skype. He's the Chief Executive Officer, Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chukwueluka Ume. He joins me to discuss this and more. Good afternoon, Dr. Ume.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
It's really good to see you. It's been a while.
I know. Yes,
we're back to the matter, like they say. They usually say, we're back to this matter, the power matter. Now, first is, yes, I'd like you to react to the incessant power station or power plants, the collapse that we witnessed in recent times. It's becoming a recurrent decimal. It's always in the news. The last time the minister was even out to apologize openly that we had issues with power plants and all of this. Dr. Ume, take us through, how did we get to this point, despite our privatization stress and all of that?
I mean, Tolulope, you have to understand. I mean, if you remember, the different times we spoke, and I've told you that these problems will continue to recur until we get some things straight. And we haven't fixed those things. The value chain is still broken. So we're going to continue to see this problem for years to come. And the minister can apologize. I mean, it simply means that he understands the pain that people are facing, which is a good start. But that doesn't solve the problem. Now, think about this. Why does the power system collapse? Why does the grid collapse? The grid collapses for several reasons. But one of the major reasons it collapses is because when you have a mismatch in the load and the generation, some of these generating plants will be overloaded, and to protect themselves, they trip off. Tripping off means they shut down. And when they shut down, the remaining plants on the grid will get overloaded, and they all start to shut down one by one. And before you know it, they've all shut down. To start these machines back up takes a while. It takes anywhere from 30 minutes to days to start some of these machines back up. And this is part of the problem. Now, the question you may ask is, why does the overload happen? If we're going to see an overload about to happen, why can't we quickly shut down? Well, there's a part of the TCN called the system operator. They are responsible for operating the grid, the transmission network. And it's up to them to cut off loads that are causing overload when they happen. Are they able to do this? Do they have the right equipment to do this? Do they have the right up-to-date equipment to do this? Are the people there able to do what they're supposed to do? The answer is probably no to all of it. So it brings us back to where we started off. Fine, we've done part of the privatization. We need to finish it so that private companies can put in place the right equipment, the right personnel, and the right amount of support to help the grid run reliably every day. Now, we're also talking about capacity. That's another conversation altogether. We've been dealing with this 12,500 megawatts of installed capacity for years. And we're still going to keep dealing with that until certain things change. Those things haven't changed.
So until those things change, we will remain where. Now, let me follow up now. A layman's question. Now, let me ask this way. We have a lot of gas-fired plants across the country and all of it. And Nigerians will say, we have the reserves. We have even proven and unproven reserves of gas in this country. Even the Minister of State came out to say that we are more of a gas country even than a crude oil nation. Now, why are we not taking advantage of this? Or better still, what's the process for us to take advantage of what we have to get what we want?
I can answer that question in many different ways. And I've answered it with the telecoms example. Let me answer it with the aviation example. Those of us that live in Lagos know that we have two options. If you're flying locally, you can either go to MM1 or go to MM2. Between those two airports, which one works better? Which one is cleaner? Which one do you go to? And if it's raining, you can walk through a gangway that actually moves and you get on the plane without getting wet. Which one would you always see the escalator working? It's MM2. Why? MM2 is privately run, where MM1 is not completely privately run. So for us to start to get things right, for us to harness the gas, it's a travesty that in a country that is a gas producing country that happens to provide to produce some liquid, some oil, we're still flaring gas. We're selling most of our gas as LNG overseas, and we're using probably about 20% or less than 20% of the gas produced in country in Nigeria to produce electricity, to generate electricity, to do petrochemicals, produce glass, and so on and so forth. It's a travesty, but that's the reality. Now, imagine that in Nigeria, we also have only about 11,000 kilometers of gas pipelines around the entire country. How do you think this would ever work, Tolu? It's never going to work. Now, we have 11 discos across the country, distribution companies, and we're still speaking of, we have about 9 to 10 million registered consumers of electricity out of a country of 200 million people. Why is this? We're not metering enough. You have places in Lagos, this Lagos that we live in today, places in Lagos that have been in darkness for about 2 months. Why? I was speaking to someone yesterday, and he said he's been in darkness for 2 months because the transformer in his area in Surulere has been down, and the disco says they can't buy another one because they need to make enough money to come and buy and install another one. Why is the disco not buying another one? The disco will tell you that they're hamstrung because they're not allowed to make the required investment within a year to do that. So, there's so many different things that come into play here. Some investors want to come and put in money, but they'll tell you that the right investment scenario setting is not here. Dollar is going crazy. Today you buy things at 360 naira to the dollar. Tomorrow it's 480 naira. You can't even predict. You can't plan. So there's so many different factors that are affecting this power system, and for us to deal with them, I think we should do the first part, which is just privatize it completely. Let the private sector try. We can't keep doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. It will never change, Tolu. And you and I are going to say this again next year unless something changes.
Honestly, we've been saying this since we started the privatization process, and we're still talking about it up to date. Now, to the distribution end, which, it's about 60-70% privatized, right? Dr. Ume, it's not 100% yes. Too.
No, it's 60%.
Now, the argument is also that, like you said, they want to invest, but they also want to recoup their investment. Like someone would say, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Now, we talk about metering, which is what everyone in Nigeria also wants to hear about. We started with the MAP scheme. Later, the government came up with this new scheme that is supposed to give free meters to Nigerians. I think, I don't know how many millions of meters that should be distributed. But we still have, how well do you see this scheme bridging that metering gap, which will help, of course, erase the issue of estimated billings? Many will say Nigerians are ready to pay if they are metered. We've seen the issues of willing buyer, willing seller, and people are actually keen into this.
Yeah. Some estates here in Lagos, and I keep referring to Lagos because I think you and I live here, so it's easy to relate to.
Yes.
Relate to. There's some estates in Lagos that pay 60 naira, 70, 80 naira per kilowatt hour for electricity. They're completely off the grid, but they have at least 22 hours of electricity every day, and they can tell you exactly when that power is going to be delivered.
Yes.
And people are happy to pay it. They're not having to deal with diesel generators. They're not having to deal with the grid collapsing, or whether the grid is up or whether it's down. They don't really care. So they're happy to pay it. Now, you ask which one comes first, chicken or the egg. In this particular situation, let's get this right. The people that own the 60% of the discos are private companies, funded by banks, funded by their private equity, funded by different companies, right? And they made that investment to make a profit. They're not charity organizations. You and I know this. So they want to make a profit. So for them to make more investments in their respective networks, they want to see how they will get their money back. Get it right. And so that's, whether you call that the chicken or you call that the egg, it doesn't really matter. They need to make their money back. For them to make their money back, they need to be sure that whatever or any equipment they install in the network will yield a return that they can see, that they can measure. That's not rocket science. It's the same anywhere you go in the world. So that's the first part of this. Now, the government still owns 40%. You can imagine how boardroom conversations go. If you were a director in a private company and your income depends on what that private company is doing, when you come for board meetings, you want to make sure that you understand exactly what the company is doing. You want to make sure that all the investments that they are making will yield fruits. And you want to make sure that the guys running the company are the right people to run the company to make a profit for you and your other investors. That's how discos should be run. And if the discos need to go and borrow money to make these investments, they should be able to, they should have the liberty and the confidence to go borrow the money and put the money in to make the right investment. But beyond the discos, I mean, you also have to think about TCN. TCN is still government owned and operated. And TCN is the bridge between the GenCos and the discos. So if the load is not getting there on time, getting to the discos when it's supposed to, you're going to have a problem. If the frequency of the electricity getting to the discos is off, you're going to have a problem. If the loads are not correct, you're going to have a problem. So, Tolu, again, there are so many different parts of this equation that need to be balanced. And it's not rocket science. There's so many smart people in Nigeria who are already in the power industry, but they need to be allowed to do what they need to do.
Are you sure government is giving room for this conversation? Because I think there needs to be a conversation. They need to sit around the table. The GenCo guys, the TCN guys, and the distribution guys. And, you know, he hit the nail by the head, because I remember when we had the Minister of Works, Power and Housing about today, Raji Fashola, the former governor of Lagos State. There was this strategic meeting he held all around states, you know, going around and having to have the CEOs on ground, knowing what the problems are, sorting it out immediately. At least that helped a lot. I think that was where we got even this willing buyer and willing seller. I know of some markets that got, you know, electrified because of all of this, as in they got electricity supply. Now, do you think government is creating that environment for this kind of discussion so that we really get it right? If the power sector works, jobs will be created. You know,
that is an interesting point. We've had many engagements. You know, it's been a lot of meetings where the discos, GenCos, the transmission company, the government regulators, they all sit in the same room and try to hash this out. But we keep talking about it. We keep talking about it, and talk is cheap, Tolu. If we had been talking about the telecoms industry the way we're talking about the power industry, today you and I would not be able to have this Skype call. You will not be able to have a cell phone to call me, and I won't call you if we're just talking about it. It boils down to something very simple. Government allow private companies to do their work. Allow them to make the investments, provide the required security in terms of investment security to them to make the investment. Think about this, Tolu. The sector was privatized in 2013. We started doing it in 2011, finished in 2013. And that was supposed to energize the market. That was supposed to make us have more power. Have we added any megawatts to the system since then. We're still talking about generating about 4,000 megawatts of power. Since then, we have had only one true corporate finance genco built. That was Azura Edo Power. And even at that, people are attacking Azura Edo Power, saying that it's too expensive, we need to take it down, we shouldn't replicate that model. Are we serious? Are we really serious about doing this? So as long as we have the ability for folks, whether in government or in private sector, to second guess what is happening, as long as we have a lot of red tape for investors to jump to make the required investment in this power sector, this is what you're going to keep seeing. And this doesn't only apply to the GenCos and the DISCos, it goes all the way back to gas production in this country and gas transportation. Private companies need to be able to produce their gas on their own without too much red tape, without involvement with the government. They need to build gas pipelines. I mean, Seven Energy some years back built a gas pipeline to Ibom Power. Where is that pipeline today? How well is it doing? They took loans to do it. How well is it doing? Why aren't private companies building more gas pipelines like they do in different parts of the world? Okay? Why are we're supposed to be a net exporter of power in this country. Where are we exporting it to? Why? When we don't even have it to use within the country. So, when I sit and think about this sometimes, the solution seems very simple to me. I mean, I'm not trying to trivialize the thing. It seems simple enough because we know the first step to take, and then everything else starts to fall in place. But people talk too much about it. Exactly. And the more we talk, the more very little changes. The regulations were set. Pick one set of regulations and stick to it. And let's go do the actual work and stop talking. We need to stop all these excessive meetings. We don't need any more meetings. We already have the blueprint of what needs to be done.
It's worrisome.
So I don't know how else we want to put it to them.
I wonder why we can't just take that bold step. It's worrisome. Is it an issue of political will, or what is it about? Because I really need to get this sorted. And let's wrap up on this note while you respond to that. What about the independent power projects? My understanding is that they are independent. They should also help support. Are they doing that, Dr. Omeh?
So when you said independent power projects, can they support? I chuckled a little bit. And the reason I chuckle is this. Think about this. My own company, Century Power Generation Limited, we developed an independent power plant, 495 megawatts, okay, gas-fired. We have access to gas, natural gas. We build gas pipelines. One of our subsidiaries builds gas pipelines in this country. And we have an investor willing to put up to $1 billion of investment to build our plant. But there's just one missing ingredient: the power purchase agreement with the national grid. Now, why isn't that power purchase agreement signed? Because NBET is not able to back that power purchase agreement with liquidity. They don't have money to pay for it. So if we build that plant today and we sell the power to the national grid, they can't pay us for the power. Why then would we build it? There are other IPPs that are ready to build as well. They have also developed their projects to this point, but they can't build because they're not going to get paid when they build. And no one goes into business to throw money away. That's the hard reality. But once we have a signed power purchase agreement from NBET or from the sovereign Nigeria that is backed up by some kind of guarantees, we can have that plant running within 3 years. And it's not just us, several other companies can do the same thing, so that we can finally stop talking about an installed capacity of 12,000 megawatts. We should be talking about 40,000 megawatts of capacity in this country. Compare us to a country like Vietnam, for example. Vietnam has about 100 million people. They had 12,000 megawatts of installed capacity before. It took them about 10 years to have 40,000 megawatts of installed capacity in their country. We can do the same thing in Nigeria if only we take the bold steps. Now, the political will is there in some quarters. Some of the people in government want to do it. Unfortunately, maybe they don't have the backing, or they don't have a loud enough voice, or they don't have the support of the remaining parts of the country to do what they need to do. The fear before was raising tariffs. Guess what? Tariffs has been raised. Have you seen any change? some places, very few places, I've seen a change in the amount of electricity they get. My bills today in my own home are about 200,000 naira, 250,000 naira. But guess what? Sometimes I don't have electricity, so I still have to keep running my generator, my diesel generator. What am I paying for? Darkness again. Who's to blame? And there are many people around the country that say the same thing. You know, we're talking about MAP. A lot of people still don't have the prepaid meters that they're supposed to get. Who are you going to blame? The DISCO or the government or the MAP program? So
honestly, it's worse. I know we can go on, and I see that passion anytime we talk about the sector, you know, making us really understand all that it means. But time is always not on our side. Chief Executive Officer, Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chukwueloka Ume. We'll definitely continue this discussion, but we hope that at that point, maybe we'll be generating close to 10,000 megawatts. I'm just projecting. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right there.